Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Tailosive Tech live on YouTube. It's been a minute. I've been traveling. It's been a trip. Oh my god, so much has happened since the last time I went live. If you want to know more about it, check the other, more red Tailosive channel. And, yeah, I haven't forgotten, though. We still have some very old questions that I don't want to leave anybody behind, specifically our channel members who have been oh so generous and patient with me. Thank you, by the way, YJ Choi, for waiting so long. But basically, he asked, you acknowledge that software development is hard work and people underestimate the difficulty of fixing software bugs while constantly trying to add more features without breaking existing features. But you also seem to agree with the sentiment that iPadOS getting most, if not all, of iOS 18's features still wasn't impressive of an update this year, instead of making us wait till the next iPadOS like they did with lock screen customization. Do I think tech YouTubers slash nerds who follow tech news have unreasonably high expectations of the quantity of features added year over year, or do you think they're or do I think they are justified in their frustrations? Long question, but thanks in advance. Well, I answered your question in advance. way late. Wait, what's the opposite of advance? Basically, I took over 2 weeks to answer that question, but I genuinely really haven't had a good moment to just sit down and go live, and this felt like the perfect opportunity, so please weigh in on the chat for any questions or topics that you've had regarding the past couple weeks of news. But I think there's truth to both parts of that question. For one, like, yes, people absolutely underestimate the complexities of software development. A lot of people can visualize software features or entertain software features in their mind, but then not realizing how much work goes into genuine software development, and especially patching things and fixing bugs. It's not an exact science. You have to identify what's causing the bug, and then how do you fix it, and then how do you not create 5 more bugs in the process. And yes, everyday people, including myself, do not have a firm grasp on how complicated it is to fix these kinds of problems that we all kind of just take for granted. I do think a lot of us just kind of assume, oh yeah, well, software, it just works, and they come out with a feature and the features work, and it's like, there's actually a ton of work that goes into developing these things. But the question kind of stemmed back around to iPadOS and how the tech community has all of these demands or hopes or desires for iPadOS to do all these amazing things or have product symmetry with iOS and that kind of thing. I don't think it's necessarily unreasonable, what people are asking. Mainly, I think the argument falls apart that it might be too hard when you charge as much as you do for these products, which is why my angle as far as iPadOS is concerned is it's always come back to, we have a laundry list of feature requests, and a lot of them would be fixed by having dual boot macOS support, which I personally see as a domino effect. Like, you knock down one pin and you knock down all the rest of these tiles at once by adding really just one feature, in a way. We know that Apple is up for doing dual booting. They've done dual booting on their devices in the past. In fact, they've let you dual boot on Macs to put non-Apple software, non-Apple operating systems on your Mac. Now, obviously, that's gotten a lot harder with the transition to Apple Silicon, but if the EU has their way, it definitely doesn't seem like, to me, they're going to be stopping European Union from allowing features like side loading or alt stores or third-party applications like Google Maps or Spotify being integrated on the system level, if you so desire, being able to access other digital assistants, and of course RCS support. A lot of people were against, a lot of people at Apple, or at least publicly, they said, we don't see the need for RCS, what's the point? And then EU kind of steps in and they're like, okay, I guess we got to support it. So in my opinion, it is absolutely not that far a stretch at all that Apple could allow an option for you to run iPadOS, because iPadOS as a touch optimized operating system is still pretty great, especially compared to a lot of Android tablets and how they're optimized to run apps on the Play Store. iPad, just as an iPad and nothing more than that, iPadOS kind of gets the job done. And I've always kind of echoed that sentiment that for a $300 iPad, like the iPad 10 is now, iPadOS is fine. It kind of covers all of the necessary hardware. But when you start charging $1,000, $1,300 now for the 13-inch OLED iPad Pro, when you're charging that kind of money, people are going to expect a certain amount of software capability, which is why I don't find it unreasonable, even though, yes, it is very difficult to get software to do everything you want it to, but I do echo the sentiment that matching every iOS feature to iPadOS or matching every macOS feature to iPadOS is extremely time-consuming. It's not the kind of thing they could do overnight. It's not the kind of thing they could just do 1 year and just say, we're going to make sure that everything you can do on your Mac, you can now do on your iPad. Especially when it took us, how long, 13, 14 years to get a calculator app on the iPad. I know they weren't actively working on the calculator app for 14 years. But my point is, it's a lot of work to get little things working. Whereas, in my opinion, diverting some of that software engineering efforts to just say, let's allow dual booting, like they already have in the past with Microsoft operating systems, it would be a much shorter term solution. It may not be ideal, because I understand a lot of people are saying, yeah, it would be nice if you didn't have to dual boot into macOS. You just need to add all of those features you're asking for on macOS to iPadOS and just make iPadOS better. But as we've seen with the development pacing of iPadOS, and from sources familiar with the matter, I'll say, there is no designated iPadOS team. There's an iOS team that occasionally has to adjust iPadOS so that it gains most of the features iOS gains. Hello, Brandon. Hello, Alpha. Back home already. I got home this morning, actually. It was a crazy long road trip, and I'll go more into it on the EV channel, but I don't want to talk about it yet. It's a long story. Jackson Smith says, well, iPadOS worked well for me during uni. Everything that could be done was just a better experience on my Mac. I said it was like everything took 5 steps instead of 2 to reach the same objective. Yeah, I can echo that as well, having made videos and ran YouTube channels on the iPad. It's like, can you do it? Yes, but especially when the pricing gets up there close to that of Macs, it's like, okay, is it better than a Mac? No. And if it was cheaper than a Mac, I'd be okay with that. I'd be like, okay, it's a cheaper alternative that gets the job done in a few more steps. But when it's more expensive than a Mac and it takes longer, it's like, okay, what are we doing here? Seems like Apple is rumored to go back to an older era, bringing back thin products along with a possible unapologetically plastic Apple Watch SE. Your thoughts, Drew? Man, all the next video ideas. We're just diving into them right now. Yeah, I would never say never, just because there's so many reports that everybody doubted were real and then actually ended up happening, especially Apple Vision Pro. That was rumored for a long time and sounded very hard to believe, and yet they did it. Even though it was crazy and arguably kind of foolish and stupid, they still did it. $3,500 for a 2-hour battery life, yeah. But yeah, my thoughts on Apple going back to thin designs is, I feel like the main sentiment that we've been echoing for a while now is running out of innovation, running out of new ideas. Let's talk about the trend setter here, the new OLED iPad Pros. Apple was boasting and even pulling out, dusting off the iPod Nanos to show off how thin the new iPad Pro was. But again, like a million YouTubers have already said, were people asking for a thinner iPad? Is it really that beneficial to have a thinner iPad? Would people rather just have the same size iPad just with a bigger battery life? Yeah, I agree. Most people were not really looking for new iPads. Thinner iPads. Most people, thank you, by the way. I'll read all the messages in a second. Most people were complaining about the software, and then Apple doubled down on how thin it is. But the fact that they marketed it so hard as this is our thinnest Apple product, like, it's more of just a flex of their engineering skills, and then they can convert that into marketing material. Like, oh my God, look at how cool our tablet is. Look at how thin it is. No one else can pack so much performance into a device this thin. So similarly, it sounds like they're working on implementing that same kind of tech into a really thin iPhone. Again, who would rather have more battery life? I think most people would rather have more battery life. Also, there's way more durability concerns once you start getting much thinner, And that's why I don't think they're making it thinner for necessarily many objective advantages. Most people slap a case on their phones anyway. A lot of people are still using fairly heavy steel iPhone Pro Maxes from yesteryear. That's a fun word. Is that a real word? It sounds right. Visualizer says, "Hey Drew, how's my summer going?" It's very hot, but it's going great. I had an action-packed vacation. Was it a vacation? I worked a little bit on it, but the trip was fun, and I got to hang out with my family a lot, and we did. There was something really eventful going on pretty much every day. So normally on trips and stuff, I find time to work in between all the craziness, but on this trip, oh man, I apologize for the lack of uploads because it was packed. We were going to theme parks, we were going to lakes and swimming and canoeing, and it was packed. It was great though. It's going wonderful, but it's very hot. It's also very, very hot. All right, Pyri Karima, I hope I pronounced that correctly, says, "Been following you from the beginning. Great stuff." When is the beginning for you guys? I keep hearing that. It's usually the attic. Alpha says, "How can we be too hard on iPadOS team when there's no iPadOS team to be hard on?" That's not an unreasonable statement. We're not too hard on the team because there is no team. Brandon says, "Used to love iPad, but then I got a Mac. Love your vids." Oh, thanks, Brandon. Appreciate it. Yeah, I'm the same way. I often had a difficult time accepting that I would buy a $1,000 tablet and a, probably $3,000 laptop, or much, in my case, like $6,000 laptop. It's a lot of money, but I do use the crap out of it, both for media. I mainly on the trip was using it for entertainment, but also for work. I mainly paid extra for that storage, and now that I'm working at Tello Trucks and on Tailosive, it's funny how similar those names are. Mine was first. But yeah, I film a lot of stuff, and I have to store a lot of footage locally, so I am genuinely using the storage. I'm not looking forward to the day when I run out of space on my laptop. External drives only get you so far, and it makes it harder to pack and stuff. In relation to my thought, could Johnny Ive like-minded people DNA be regaining control of the company? Possibly. I still feel like there's this emphasis on not going too far, like Apple hasn't removed many ports for a while. Actually, they're still kind of moving in the opposite direction. Like, everyone thought they were going portless, but instead they went USB-C. Now they're bragging about USB-C. They're advertising the fact that the iPhone has USB-C. Of course, they're doubling down on the HDMI port by giving it even faster throughput capabilities. They brought back MagSafe. So I don't think it's... A lot of that Johnny Ive likeness or mindedness was about thinner, and that often meant at the compromise of a lot of functionality, whereas, and I think Apple's probably making the right call, they seem to be trying to find that middle ground where they're like, okay, we can make things thinner and lighter, but let's also try not to compromise too much on the utility. Like, if they made the iPad so thin that it couldn't use USB-C anymore, so they get rid of Type-C, and now you can't sell it in the EU, and you have to charge it inductively with some kind of pad on the back. Yeah, that to me almost sounds more Johnny Ive-like. Be like, oh, it just charges via the smart connector now. It doesn't need Type-C. It's so thin, we can't fit Type-C on there. It's like, okay, well, it's a Pro iPad. People use it for work and stuff, so they might want to plug it in. And, ports are kind of handy. If you can, again, sometimes the middle ground is the sweet spot. You can wirelessly charge this thing. If you want to, you could never plug anything into it, but it doesn't hurt too much by having the option. It's not that bad. iPad Air with M2 is as far as anyone needs to go. The Pros are luxury devices. The last-gen Pros are great value. Yeah, I was going to say I wouldn't go with the M2 iPad Air because you can get a several-year-old iPad Pro that's pretty much identical. And you get the higher refresh rate display. You still get a good chip that's fast. Let's see. What did they add from iOS 17 into iPadOS 18, to be honest? Ugh. You're asking me off the top of my head? I'm sure there's something. battery health features. That was more from the iPhone 15, but yeah, the new iPad Pros have like a charge limiter and optimized battery charging, but I still don't understand why they can't add that to older iPads. That seems kind of like planned obsolescence in my opinion, but I reckon the next iPad Air will borrow the hardware of the current iPad Pro, which would make sense how light it is, and then the next iPad Pro will be thicker with more battery. How do you say your name? Madix1. There's a long-term game I see they're playing here. Yeah. Let's see. You say it doesn't make sense for iPad Pros to be more expensive than MacBooks, but it also doesn't make sense for iPhones to be more expensive than Android phones. Everyone agrees. Anytime you start a sentence with everyone agrees, that it's never the case. But no, I said that an iPad Pro is a hard sale if it's more expensive than a Mac, but can't do what a Mac can do. I'm actually not against iPad Pros at their current pricing. I don't think it's really a pricing problem. It's more of a software problem. Considering the incredible hardware that they have on them, the price could be justified if it could do everything a Mac could do in regards to software. Run the Mac version of Final Cut. Run the Mac version of Xcode. And the Mac version, in my opinion, isn't necessarily just some magic. It has to be the Mac version. It's just the fully unlocked version. Like, I think if you spend $2,000 on an iPad setup, you should be able to write applications for iPhones on it. A $600 Mac can do that, so why can't a $2,000 iPad? That's all I'm saying. What do I think is the average lifespan of an iPad? It depends on the definition of lifespan, because I know a lot of people that keep using iPads long after they stop getting software support, especially a lot of grandmas. For some reason, grandmas and iPads just go well together. I guess because iPads might be just intuitive and simple. iPad is made for entertainment, Mac is made for work. Well, then you don't need an M4 chip for entertainment. I'm sorry. If you don't see anything wrong with your 14 Pro, then keep it until you're excited about a new feature. Yeah, I agree with that. Don't base your upgrade on how good the new phone is. Base it on how bad your current phone is. You think they should bring a watered-down version of macOS? That would be a good start. I'm not saying it would be perfect, but if it resulted in the iPad having more functionality, then yeah, I think it'd be worth it. There's just a lot of basic things. And again, it's not one or two things. That's my biggest overall problem, is that if there were only 3 or 4 things that would solve everybody's problem, then I would say, yeah, just update iPadOS to support those 3 or 4 things. But the truth is, it's a laundry list of little things. It's about like multimedia playbacks, or it's about certain Safari extensions, or it's about terminal commands. These are not like one big feature that iPadOS needs. It's like dozens, if not hundreds, of tiny features that macOS has that iPadOS doesn't. And I don't think it's practical to assume that the iPadOS team, which doesn't exist, can individually add all of these little features. It's more like, no, just knock over the one domino, which is add an option for you to run macOS on the iPad itself, and then basically, boom, all those little features. They may be kind of awkward roundabout features of like, oh, I got to boot it into macOS mode to do it, but at least it could technically do it. And then we could have a version of an Apple product that supports the Apple Pencil, has 5G, has OLED, has a touchscreen, that can also make software applications, that can run terminal commands, that can run the fully unlocked version of Logic, Final Cut, Xcode, and you don't have to get the watered-down version that they came up with for the tablet experience. What would a watered-down macOS look like? Maybe it doesn't allow apps from outside the App Store, so it's like a version of macOS, but it's only the apps that are on the Mac App Store or something like that. It could leave out a few things, but it would be a good start, is all I'm saying. It could just run the things that we know Macs can run natively. Maybe it doesn't do emulation. It doesn't have Rosetta. So if an app isn't optimized for Apple Silicon, it just doesn't run. I don't know. They should make a touchscreen Mac and get rid of the iPad too. I actually don't agree with that. I think there should be devices, there should be laptops and even desktops that do not have touchscreen interfaces. And I personally believe that there should be an operating system with hardware designed for that operating system, built around keyboard and mouse as the only input. And that's what I think macOS is good at. iPadOS should be the blur between keyboard and mouse interface and touch interface. I don't think you need two hybrid operating systems. Obviously, iOS is like almost exclusively touch. Technically, there's some accessibility ways you can add a keyboard and mouse, but almost nobody does that, right? iOS is pretty much from the ground up designed to be touch-dominant interface. macOS is the opposite. It's pretty much from the ground up designed to be keyboard and mouse interface. iPadOS is a bit of both, and I hope that they could expand on that over the long term. But because it takes so long for them to add things, I think the easiest solution that would take the least amount of time and be the easiest for the software team to develop, again, not saying it would be easy, but easiest out of all the options, to knock down all these pins, add all of these laundry list of features people are asking for iPads to do in regards to software by just saying, okay, in the developer settings, if you really know how to look for it, you can boot it into a Mac and switch between iPadOS and macOS. M4 chip is super fast. Those NANDs they ship in there are really, really quick read and write. Imagine how fast with Apple Silicon you could probably boot between operating systems. It'd probably be way faster than the boot camp days of old when we switched between Windows and macOS. And because Apple's in charge of the whole thing. I just think people want the iPad to be a laptop way too much. Yeah, if they never added the first-party keyboard and mouse support, then maybe this discussion would be... I wouldn't be asking for macOS if they weren't actively always advertising the keyboard case with the trackpad. It's like, you added all of this Mac hardware, naturally I'm going to ask for Mac software. Word sort of sucks on iPad, especially with images. Is Pages any better? You know, I don't do a lot of document work, I'm afraid, so I can't really comment on that accurately. Can one take the Mac laptop and just install Windows OS? At least back in the Intel days, you definitely could. Apple never really stopped people from doing it. They've actively said they're not against supporting it in the future, but it's kind of up to Microsoft, whatever that means. But it doesn't sound like they're like fundamentally against it. Where do I think we're going with Apple VR headset? Will it ever replace the iPhone? No, but I don't think it has to replace the iPhone to make a big impact. I think, like most Apple products, the first generation is not a big hit. If you ask people what their favorite generation of iPhone is, no one will say the first gen. I know that from firsthand experience. I asked everybody what your favorite generation of iPhone was, and it was always like the 6S or the 5 or the 4. That was the one that really swayed me over. That was the most iconic. It's always the follow-ups where the product find its stride, right? It's like Apple Watch goes mainstream when it hits the Series 4, or the iPhone goes mainstream when it hit the iPhone 4. The iPad really got serious when they got to, I don't know, the third generation. Yeah, it takes several follow-ups, and releasing the product and mass producing the product is an important exercise for Apple to figure out exactly, okay, how do we build this? How do we scale this? And then they take all of the customer feedback and run with it. And I think they are. We're already hearing, it's still in rumor territory, but thank you, Nicholas, by the way. I'll read that in a second. We're hearing behind-the-scenes reports claiming that they've kind of scrapped a lot of their ideas for a second-generation Apple Vision Pro, but they're still actively looking at how to lower the price, which to me is an indication that they are still actively working on a second-generation headset that supports Vision OS and spatial computing, but they've taken everybody's suggestions, and they're now looking at, okay, how do we improve on this and make it cheaper and make it more affordable? So figuring out that, okay, this type of product people aren't really comfortable spending $3,500 on yet. They're taking that into consideration. They're looking at all the feedback. People are saying the resolution is fine, but the weight is really bothering me, and does weight matter so much with does the premium materials they use matter as much when it's something you're wearing on your face? So they're probably putting more now on like comfort. Let's focus more on making it comfortable and making it maybe more stylish, or increasing the battery life, that kind of thing. So I don't think it'll replace the smartphone, but I think, as it already has, the smartphone will become more and more of a camera every year. It's kind of replacing that old footprint of digital camera, point-and-shoot cameras, camcorders that people used to have. I'm filming everything I do now on my phone. and it'll probably continue to double down more and more as a camera-focused device, whereas over time, as it gets cheaper and as the quality gets better, and they are able to scale up the manufacturing of it, I think Apple Vision-based products will probably start to become fairly, impactful by replacing a lot of our screens. It could replace the screen for your laptop. It could probably they could cast the screen onto your phone so that your iPhone screen doesn't have to be on, but you could still be using it, and that could change the way iOS works fundamentally. You could have, widgets that stick out from the side of the phone, or the volume indicator comes out from behind the phone instead of on the screen. So it could change a lot and mask out your fingers when you're texting and stuff. A lot of things could change without it replacing the phone, is my point. Like, the iPhone didn't replace the Mac, right? The Mac is still a thing. iPhone didn't kill off the Mac, but the iPhone was a huge deal, obviously. It basically changed the world. Nicholas Linthicum, thank you for 12 months of support. Very generous of you. He says, the Apple Watch Ultra is successful because it is thicker while including much longer battery life. Based on the census I've seen online, people want the same in an iPhone, not a slim model. Your thoughts? I don't think Apple's looking at it as one way or the other. I think they're looking at it as, if you want something super thin and super light, we have an option for you. And if you want something thicker and heavier but longer battery life, we have something for you. So keep in mind, none of the rumors about the slim model, which, by the way, I highly doubt they'll call it the iPhone 17 Slim. It'll probably be some other name. I don't know, that maybe iPhone Air, and it's just the lighter one, and that's the big emphasis, is it's cheaper and lighter. But I very much believe they will continue making Pro iPhones with big batteries and thicker designs, because they know they can upsell people very easily. Tom Anderson, thank you so much for your support with Tailosive Tech Plus. Very kind of you. Let's see. Jackson says, theoretically, if all iOS devs move to the iPad for a year, leaving iOS 19 bare, would you be fine with that trade-off if it meant the iPad got a chance of getting a good update? Honestly, yeah. iOS 18 does a lot of stuff, and I genuinely feel like I'm sure there's more they could come up with. Every year, Apple comes up with some cool new features for iOS, but I wouldn't mind skipping a year because honestly, iOS just works really well for me. It's not terribly buggy. I know there's some updates where it's worse than others, but for me at least, I don't feel like, with regards to software on hardware, the Mac doesn't feel limited by its software. Like, everything that I want to do on my Mac, I feel like I'm able to do. The software takes good advantage of the hardware. In the same way, on my iPhone, I feel like the software takes good advantage of the hardware. There's a couple of little things that I would like changed, but for the most part, my iPhone is reliable and it's consistent and it works and I like it. So if it meant that a year's worth of development could result in the iPad software fully taking advantage of all the hardware, and it lets you do everything you could do on your Mac and more, because it has 5G and an Apple Pencil and OLED. So it really should be able to do much more than your Mac, and the only compromise would be the battery life and the ports and the speaker and the size. If you care more about those things, you would go with a Mac, but if you don't care about how many ports you have or how long your battery life is, then the iPad is probably going to be the superior purchase, and you're paying for it because it's more expensive than a Mac. But yeah, I would say it's worth it. I would say just take a year off from iOS development, or at least slim it down to just be about software patching. Obviously, don't take a year off if there's massive bugs that you need to fix, but if there's just no new features for a year, I would be fine with that, because I feel like iOS is good in its current state, especially now with iOS 18 coming. You can put apps anywhere on the home screen. We were asking for that for a long time. All the theme packs now where you can basically change the color of the apps and the dark mode and stuff is cool. We've got a bit more customization than we used to have, and we got a great app store. We got a lot of pro camera features now with Final Cut Camera. Yeah, that's a... It's fine to take a break if it would help the iPad kind of catch up, in my opinion. I only use my iPad Air 4th gen for travel, but my sister wants it if I ever would to upgrade. Would I approve of it? I don't know your financial situation. You don't need my approval, but yeah, like, if if you find a good deal and you think you'll keep using it and it'll be worth it, sure, why not? I think the 2021 MacBook Pro is the best upgrade to a product in the last 10 years. Took everything that actually matters and upgraded. I think I agree with you. I'm still using my 2021 MacBook Pro, almost 3 years old, and it's still doing great. It exports videos very fast. The display is bright and vibrant and rich. The battery life is great. I actually used it a lot today. I was watching videos and editing videos on it, all on a single charge, and I didn't charge to full today either. And it was not only until right before I started the live stream that I plugged it in. So just everything about it, there's very little I would change if I could change anything. It's darn near the closest I've ever had to like a perfect Apple product. Have I decided about giving my 15 Pro to my wife in upgrading this year? No, I haven't, but it probably won't happen now because my dang car is costing me a lot more than I expected it to, which is frustrating. So all the money I would have spent on a new iPhone had to go to a new tire. Yay! EVs. I'm really bitter. It's too soon. I'm being really hard on my car, but maybe time will pass. I need time to process this experience. It's very frustrating. It still doesn't even have a calculator app. No, you're not too hard on iPadOS. It does now. It's just through beta, and in the fall it will have the fully unlocked calculator app. So we can't use the calculator app excuse anymore because they did technically come out with a pretty great calculator app with all the math notes features. Go watch Tailosive EV if you're curious about what's going on with my car. But tire damage and self-driving, basically. When do you think we'll get M4 MacBook Pros? I wouldn't be shocked if they put in the base model MacBook Pro. I don't think they're going to upgrade the M3 Pro or the M3 Max MacBooks later this year. But I believe there have been some reports saying that by the end of this year, maybe around October, they're going to put the M4 chip in the entry-level MacBook Pro. You know how kind of that entry-level MacBook Pro is kind of in its own separate category from the actual MacBook Pros that have more ports and stuff? It's confusing. I hate the naming scheme, but at least the new 14-inch MacBook Pro that's cheaper is a lot closer to being a MacBook Pro than the Touch Bar MacBook Pro, which really should not have been called a MacBook Pro. They should have just called that the regular MacBook. They really only called it the MacBook Pro because of marketing, and I think they knew that the sales would be better. Yeah, adult life sucks. There's been unexpected expenses that have come up. Another off-topic, not tech-related thing, but because I got a new job working at Tello Trucks, I'm not trying to brag or get into the nitty-ditty details of everything, but my income went up. Okay, I'll just say it. I'm making more now than I used to make. But where I live, in the US of A, America, baby, health insurance is very expensive. And when your income exceeds a certain amount, the price of your health insurance goes way up along with it. So my health insurance was at a certain reasonable price, and now because of my income going up, my health insurance is now jumped up. So it's like, oh, God. Why do I even try? Why do I work so hard? What's the point? At least where I live, it often feels like you are motivated to make as little money as possible, because when you make under a certain income limit, all these doors start opening up. Oh, you qualify for this, you qualify for this, and then you work harder and you make more. And then it's like, oh, never mind, you have to pay for all these other things out of pocket. And it's like, great, thank you. Is your car fixes, says Michael Lazito. Mostly. I'll dive more into that on the EV channel. I don't want this to turn into an EV stream. But needless to say, my expenses have gotten much worse. I'm fine. We're not like in trouble or anything. But it's just like unnecessary spending, like buying a new iPhone or buying a new iPad, is not at the top of our list. I'm not trying to say it's like we don't have the money for it. Obviously, we could, but it's just not on the top of our priority right now. Can't win for losing. Is the A18 Pro chip in the iPhone 16 Pro going to be as powerful as the M4? No, I don't think so. Fundamentally, as a reminder to everybody, the M series of chips are designed quite a bit differently from the A series of chips because of how much power they consume. Okay, so even though they put the M4 in MacBooks and Mac Minis and iPads, it's still pretty much optimized as a chip that's designed to consume between, I forget the exact number, but it's somewhere between like 10 to 15 watts at peak performance. At under load, it can pull 15 watts. So it's a certain amount. I forget off the top of my head. It's like 8 performance cores, and then it has 4 or 6 efficiency cores, whereas the A series chip is maxed out, I believe, really only supposed to pull 7.5 to 10 watts. I don't even think it goes to 10. I think it's more like 7 or 8 watts. When it's under complete extreme performance load, it doesn't come even close to the bare minimum of the M series chip. So the M chips are kind of designed for more power-hungry use cases that you experience on a Mac. I don't think you experience much on an iPad, but they put it in the iPad anyway. It mainly comes down to power consumption. I think the A17 Pro, it depends on the example, because there's not like just performance units. It's like in these circumstances the A17 Pro might be faster than the M1 in certain regards, but in other situations, of course, the M1 is much faster. In fact, in most situations the M1 is faster. But I think it was in some Geekbench test or something, the A17 Pro was pretty much on par with the M1. So the A18 Pro might come close to the performance of the M2, maybe the M3. I don't know what kind of jump they're talking about doing, but no, I don't think it'll be on par with the. I don't think it'll be on par with the M4. The M4 just came out, and not that the M4 is that much drastically faster, but yeah. Anywho. Let's see. Single core, probably close performance, but obviously not multi-core. Yeah, that's probably a better way of phrasing it. Thank you, Rick. I don't know if that's how you pronounce your name, but yes. Essentially, there might be some single core performance similarities, but overall, it's more about the multi-core that you actually experience. Like, one chip having better single core than another almost means nothing. Because it's like, okay, but if this chip has 12 cores and this chip has 4, then who cares which single core is faster? Guns are dirt cheap compared to healthcare in America. Depends where you're buying the guns. Like many fields, there are cheap iPads and there are expensive iPads. And if you're well-versed in the gun market, you'll know there are cheap guns and there are expensive guns. Not to mention ammo, especially if you don't refurbish and recycle your own ammunition. Ammunition is very expensive, which is why I enjoy shooting with my friends, but it's a very expensive hobby, which is why I typically only go if someone else is paying for the ammunition. I don't want to pay for the ammunition myself. It's pricey as heck. I don't understand why everyone in the world doesn't just use Android tablets. Well, most of the world uses Android, and because phones have gotten so big, I think genuinely there's just less and less people buying tablets. Like, tablets made more sense when phones were small, but it feels like every year phones just keep getting bigger and bigger, which is why people are like, why would I bother? Why would I bother buying a tablet when I can see everything on my phone just fine? Think of the rise in vertical video content, which I've definitely been getting more and more into lately. Not as a consumer of, but at my new job at Tello Trucks, the goal of the content is very different from my YouTube career. On YouTube, I'm going for making kind of interesting, engaging content that is monetizable. That's the big emphasis with YouTube, because I want to, obviously, I want to have fun, and I like bouncing ideas off you guys, but life does cost money. So the more time I can give to work is based on how the channels perform. So if the income is good, And the monetization is good based on me doing live streams or doing YouTube videos or making tweets, and I get paid from those kinds of things, then it means I can designate more time to researching or making content better, funnier, that kind of thing. Whereas with Telo Trucks, it's more about reach. We're more in the phase where it's like we don't really need to make money from the content. We're just trying to get the word out about the product. So to get the word out most effectively, it definitely involves a lot more what's it called? Vertical videos and videos that perform well on different algorithms, which I've normally not cared as much about. I'm more of just about like, let's put videos out there that don't need to have millions of views in order to make a decent amount of income. Whereas because Telo is trying to get the word out about their product and their brand, I've been making a lot more vertical video stuff, that kind of thing. But vertical video is a classic example of the popularity of it, and because so many people are watching it, it's because people watch so much stuff on their phones. They don't need to grab the tablet to watch more content. You know, a lot of people probably have the phone going and the TV going. So where does the tablet fit in that interaction? Refurbished ammo is probably not the right word, sorry. It's more like people who make their own ammo. What's it called? It's like when you take the shells, you clean off the shells, and then you can put the gunpowder back in and mount the bullets back and mount new bullets back on. My brother does it all the time. Will I get the new Beats pill to review? You're the first person to ask. I didn't find it particularly interesting, but if enough people ask, I might consider it. But I don't know. I'm kind of... The more and more I walk around in public places, the more I get sick of Bluetooth speakers. Maybe this is part of my receding hairline and growing old, but I'm starting to discover I really hate being in a outdoorsy, like if you're camping somewhere or you're canoeing somewhere, biking somewhere, someone who... Reloading ammo is probably more accurate, thank you. As you can see, I don't do it very much. But, going out in a public place and blasting music on the speaker, I'm not a fan of. It's annoying me more and more. You know, if you're just playing music for the kitchen or the living room, that's one thing. But most people would just buy a little smart speaker for that, like a HomePod Mini or a Nest Mini. It's only $50 or something like that, and it just stays plugged in. I guess having a Bluetooth speaker is kind of handy in some circumstances. I'm not saying I hate everybody who buys a Bluetooth speaker. I've bought Bluetooth speakers myself, but the more mainstream they became, the more annoyed I got with people who were just blasting music everywhere. It made me go, can you just use headphones, please? Or maybe my old person in me is coming out because I'm like, I actually really enjoy nature sounds, even if it's quiet. I just like the sound of birds chirping or I don't know. During this 4th of July trip, we did some canoeing, and I loved the sound of paddling and the water trickling, and you just hear everything going on. And there was a lot of people, so at first it was very annoying, and people blasting music and screaming and stuff, but then you canoe away from the crowds, and then you're just in this serene nature. But then you get out there, and someone pulls out a Bluetooth speaker, and they're like, ready for some tunes! And I'm like, you just killed it. You just ruined the nature moment for me. I don't know. So I'm only saying that as an effort to mention why I'm not personally that interested in Bluetooth speakers. I think there's kind of a million of them, and they pretty much all do the same thing. But I haven't... You know what? Let's do it right now. Get rid of the TV. It's worthless. You know, a lot of people probably are. Oh, Nicholas says, you're no longer a full-time YouTuber. What will this mean for your channel network, and what is the new position entail? He probably meant entail. I would argue with you that I wasn't ever really a full-time YouTuber. There were just times where YouTube was pretty much my only job. The best way I could explain it, take a Bluetooth jammer wherever you go. That's actually not a bad idea. I should do that. Is that illegal? I know Bluetooth is kind of important for certain people's setups or something. Arguably, I've done a lot of YouTube over the years. I've in the past tried to turn it into a 40-hour-a-week job. And honestly, what I've discovered is I could work twice as many hours and make 5% more money, which is another way of saying it's not really worth it. At least with my line of work, I do tech videos and EV videos, and I do podcasts. And before I got this job at Tello, I don't talk about this all that much because I didn't think it was that necessary, but it felt like to me, I mean, it's hard to describe exactly when you're on the clock or off the clock, because a lot of me working is just scrolling on Twitter or reading news articles. I'm like, I'm on my phone. Is that really working if I'm like on the couch and it's a commercial break while I'm watching a show? Do I clock in for 5 seconds? Okay, maybe you could stretch it a little higher. But for the most part, before I got this new job at Tillo, I was pretty much working 20 hours a week on Tailosive stuff. And the rest of your week fills up with life stuff. I've got family responsibilities and obligations and people that need things and stuff. But I just discovered in the past when I tried to work longer or post more frequently, either the algorithm doesn't like it or there's not enough news. With my line of work, content is very news-based. So obviously on a day when there's an Apple event, I'm working from, it could be 8 a.m. until 7 p.m. It could be an all-day job. But then there's also these long stretches of there's not a lot of news and there's not much to talk about. And I could try to squeeze news stories out of nothing best I can. But honestly, if there's not much news to be excited about, people just aren't going to go online and start watching stuff. So that's why I was more open to taking the job at Tillo, which is basically running all their social media. So if you see them post stuff on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, that's mostly me. And I kind of give them advice on what I think they should and shouldn't share. And I talk with the engineers about the product so that I can answer community questions, because we get a lot of comments and a lot of people asking about their concerns and stuff like that. So I was willing to take on the job because it's a part-time role. It's definitely not a full-time. I'm a contractor, not an employee. So we went over all the responsibilities and, everything they are expecting and everything I'm expecting. And it felt like a good fit for them because they didn't really have much social media presence at all, and very few people had heard of them. So I thought, yeah, you honestly, you kind of do need someone like me who knows how these algorithms work and kind of know how to get the word out. And of course, I have my audience, so I can bring it up so people are aware of you. But I was a big fan of them as a startup company before they reached out. For the record, they offered me a job. I did not apply for one. I didn't ask if they were hiring. They just came to me and said, we don't even know if this is something you do, but we're thinking about marketing and social media, and that seems like something you're very good at, so could you help us? Would you be open to that? And I said, okay, for this amount, I'd be willing to do it. And they said, okay, we can do it. So I don't think it should impede much on Tailosive at all. If I'm being honest, I already felt like, especially with this tech channel, less so with the EV channel, but particularly here on the older Tailosive tech channel, which is 10 years old now, it felt like, obviously when there's a big Apple event, we have lots of things to talk about. But in those dry seasons in between announcements, it's getting pretty difficult to scrape together enough topics. I would have a very hard time posting every day. And I've often discovered, like, sometimes if you start scraping together smaller topics or talking about other fields that your audience isn't as interested in, it's genuinely not worth the time. If you're not interested in it and the audience isn't interested in it, then you're not going to make much in the first place. YouTube is not a by-the-hour job. It's very much performance-based. I'm purely paid based on how well the videos do. So if I put a bunch of work into a video that doesn't perform well, it's kind of a waste of time. It's time away from my family and my wife and my loved ones and friends. And so if there's genuinely not enough news to go around or not enough topics to dive into, then I was fine just not posting or just falling back to more live streaming, because it lets me answer questions directly and instead of try to guess what you guys want to talk about. I enjoy doing these personally. I have gotten much busier, obviously, but as the tech field has matured and plateaued with innovation, I think my flexibility and my amount of free time has opened up. So basically what I'm trying to say is, whether I'm working at Tello or not, I don't think it will affect my posting schedule much. Maybe a little bit. It might postpone video ideas a little bit, but even before Tello hired me, it was mainly me coming up with lots of video ideas for the EV channel, but struggling to find topics to dive into for tech until there's an Apple event. And then, of course, there's a lot of more things to talk about. But don't worry, I'm not going anywhere. I'm still here. When there's interesting things that I feel like I have something to say on, I'll talk about them. If you suggest something and I don't make a video on it, it's probably because I don't feel comfortable or confident enough to comment on it or feel like I have much to add to the conversation, in which case making a video about it would just kind of be noise. Just be like me echoing what other people have already said. So debatably, arguably, Nicholas, I don't think I ever really, not at least recently, I don't think I was a full-time YouTuber. I was always kind of a part-time YouTuber. So now I'm part-time YouTuber, part-time social media. Well, at least that's what the badge says when I went to the plug-and-play event to represent Tello. They never gave me like an official title, but at least on my badge it says social media marketing. So I don't know. I don't think they wanted me to use the term. I'm not the chief of marketing. That's a different kind of role. But I am pretty much in charge of all the social media stuff. Sending much love with the new position. The work-life balance you have mentioned is very important. Happy for you. Well, thank you. I appreciate it very much. I appreciate all the support. It's a very different kind of work, I must say. There's some overlap with YouTube work, but not much, honestly. It's like running a social media network based around essentially one product is very, very different from running a channel that talks about all kinds of different products and brands and companies. And I'm learning a lot more about things that go on behind the scenes at companies, and struggling a lot with the whole like, oh, can we talk about this? No, we can't. Why not? Because in the YouTube space, it's almost the opposite. You're constantly looking for new and exciting developments and wanting to dive more into those topics, like let's talk about the slimmer iPhone, or let's talk about the next generation Apple Vision, or what's the Apple Watch 10 going to look like and do. So we're constantly grasping for what's the most interesting topics in the news, and let's dive into that. And then with working at a startup company, it's like they're telling you and you're constantly learning these amazing, exciting things, but then you can't talk about any of it. You're like, no, we got to wait on this. We can't share this yet. We got to wait on that. We'll share it later, but not yet. And it's like, ugh! It goes against all of my YouTuber instincts to learn all of these cool and exciting things and not be able to talk about them. It's frustrating. Sometimes it's like, come on. I'm getting used to it. I'm learning. This live stream title is giving me massive flashbacks to a Mac Rumors forum post from 2020 titled, "Are we being too hard on the 720p webcam?" I think I remember that, but I feel like I kind of agree, because at least for a while there, a lot of people have pretty crappy internet connections, so video calls rarely are actually loading at 1080p for a lot of people, even though they all say, I need a 1080p webcam, come on, it's 2020, I need a HD webcam. And it's like, pay attention to the bit rate on your FaceTime and Zoom calls. It's probably not 1080p anyway. But that's not the point. It should have it. Yes, I'm glad we have it now. I'm using a 1080p webcam right now, and I think it looks pretty good. Let's see. For what I use my iPad Pro for, I'm not complaining about iPadOS. That said, if Apple ever adds macOS support to the iPad Pro, I would get the 1 terabyte 13-inch version. There you go! Thank you, Michael. That's exactly what I've been saying, is like, increasing the functionality of iPadOS would only drive sales higher. It can't hurt anything, in my opinion. What do you have to lose by adding macOS? All I could potentially hear people say is, oh, it gets confusing. And I'm like, well, just bury it in settings. Make it a developer thing. It's not something grandma's going to accidentally turn on. You go to settings, you go to general, you scroll to the bottom. There's an option that says switch to download macOS, and it could only be on the 512 or the 1 terabyte iPad Pros. You make it really hard to find so that only the super nerds know about it, and then you please all the YouTubers and you please all the geeks out there, because they get to say, yes, finally I can do all of these pro things on my iPad that I couldn't do before. And then if you're worried about iPadOS getting too confusing, nothing really changes for the everyday person. I'm not saying it has to be this day one, like the second you turn on the iPad, it has to ask you, do you want Mac OS or iPadOS? No. For the most part, everything just stays the same. And then there's just a backdoor option to unlock all of those little nerdy things that we asked for. I'd love to play Halo with people in the Tailosive Discord. That does sound very fun. Last time I played Halo was for my friend's bachelor party, and it was great, but both me and him are crazy busy, so I'm afraid I don't have much time for gaming. I haven't even had time to catch up on my favorite TV shows. That's how busy I've been. But it's a good busy. It's mostly busy hanging out with friends and family that are in town visiting, or I'm out of town visiting. Do I feel iPhone leaks have been at a record low this year compared to the last 6 to 7 years? Well, define low. Do you mean like accuracy or excitement or what? Because I would say they've been roughly pretty accurate over the years. Most of the iPhone leaks have been pretty... I mean, there's little things they get wrong here and there, but generally speaking, the iPhone leaks end up being mostly correct. Mentioning understanding what you can and cannot share details on with your new job must be what tech YouTubers who have NDAs on products feel on the daily basis. Yeah, you're right. It is probably similar what YouTubers are experiencing when they have those embargoes, but I think the harder part is most YouTubers who have to sign those NDAs have a release time. It's like, you get to review this iPad before it comes out, or you get to review this phone before it comes out. But it's usually like a couple weeks later that they do get to talk about everything. Whereas a lot of the stuff I'm talking about with the people at Tello, I don't get to talk about for months, possibly years, maybe longer. There's certain patented stuff that, as a fan of technology and innovative design, and as a fan of radical rethinking of tech, that's why I was so into Apple in the first place, was because their products had that emphasis of, think different. Apple changing things so much, like we're going to go gesture control, or we're moving to Face ID instead of Touch ID, or we're going all in on multi-touch. We don't need keyboards anymore. And Apple finding ways to reinvent categories and finding ways to make things do more with less. Just that essentialism, that efficiency mindset always attracted me to Apple. And Tesla, honestly. A lot of Tesla's decisions are similar. And there's a lot of those kinds of design decisions that I've seen go on internally at Tello. And a lot of it's patented and is not allowed to be shared because it's like proprietary stuff, and I'm like, I want to... As a fan of technology, it's super fun to know what's going on behind the scenes and learn about this stuff. There's a bunch of things I'm learning about that I wouldn't have known otherwise, just because it doesn't come up in the YouTube space. But when you're learning about a product that you're helping promote, it's like, I do kind of need to know how all this stuff works. But it's something I've had to talk to the engineers quite a bit about. There's a lot of talk where they love telling me about things that I can't talk about. And I'm like, that's so cool, thank you, but please don't share with me all this stuff that I can't say, because that just gets me excited and I can't do anything about it. I have to... It's hard for me as a YouTuber who's, for the past over 7 years I've been doing YouTube as my only job, really. And everything in my heart wants to see exciting news and then share exciting news, and this is fighting against that inclination, which is difficult. But let's see, you didn't clarify your question earlier, Hasael, but I have not read or learned much about the CMF Phone 1, but I'm sorry, I've been driving a lot and working a lot in the past 48 hours, so I haven't had time to catch up on all the latest videos. But is there a reason you guys are excited? Should I talk about the CMF phone? Sorry, I keep wanting to say CF. It looks unique. I like the idea of it being kind of modular, and you can pop it off and stuff. I'm so jazzed about the next generation of CarPlay. I hope Tello Trucks implements it into their system. I don't want to give away too much because I'm not speaking as Tello on behalf of Tello right now. This is a Tailosive Tech live stream, but Tello very much likes CarPlay. They appreciate CarPlay. So expect the expected. Time after time, Apple drops hints about iPad and lets us down. Like what? What do you mean hints? It's not that interesting of a phone, just unique design and $200. It has a decent chip and 120Hz OLED, which is nice, plus nothing OS is a lot better than the software on most $200 phones. That does sound nice. Good screen, good chip. Okay. That doesn't surprise me or interest me that much, but correct me if I'm wrong, because I probably am, but what excited me about the pictures I saw of it was that they had just exposed screws on the back. Does that mean that you can unscrew the back and just replace the battery really easily, or I don't know, do something modular with it? It looks kind of cool. It's kind of the same concept of the nothing phone. It's like, why was this successful? I don't know, because it kind of looks different. But in the end, it's just a phone. You know, you don't really look at the back. Most people get a case anyway. And there's no NFC. Oh, yikes. Okay, that does kind of put it in gimmick territory. NFC is kind of like a pretty basic standard thing. Yeah, I use the digital wallet on my phone quite a lot, so I'm afraid to say it, but I think that would kind of be a deal breaker for me. I was almost interested. The price is very tempting, I must say. You can't replace the battery. It's purely for changing your color. Oh. Dang. That's a missed opportunity. But is the CMF phone the one with the dial on the side? You can add a wallet, lanyard, or kickstand. Ooh. Kind of just sounds like a worse version of MagSafe. Or I guess a more structured version of MagSafe. Appreciate you not forcing content. Can't count the number of times I think this video is only to push their sponsor. Yeah, I have a hard time doing that. I really only like making videos where I feel like the topic is at least somewhat interesting. I'm definitely not trying to make the case that every video I post is like the most exciting, engaging thing ever. But, you know, talking about the Apple Watch reports about, okay, there's multiple years in a row now where we thought the Apple Watch was going to be a big redesign and then it ends up not. So we should talk about leak culture and leak community a little bit. And then also we talked about, what was the other? Oh, the A18 chip. Again, I'm not like staying up late at night dreaming about the A18 chip, but it is an interesting, in my opinion at least, maybe because I'm a nerd or a geek, but I found it a little bit interesting that in the iPhone 14 series, they stopped putting the latest chip in the entry-level iPhone, but now the reports are saying Apple's going back to putting the latest chip in the entry-level iPhone. So it's like so many different styles, and I've been very critical on Apple Intelligence, so to try to play devil's advocate and kind of argue against myself, in that video that I posted last week, I think, on 4th of July or whatever, I wanted to talk about how, well, one of the unintended consequences of Apple Intelligence that's actually kind of nice is that it somewhat forces Apple to put more RAM and better chips in the latest phones. So you no longer have to worry about getting the last year's chip if you end up going with the non-Pro iPhone 16. So I'm like, okay, hey, I was critical towards Apple Intelligence, saying this is a stupid marketing gimmick, but actually turns out we might get some perks out of it. So those kinds of videos are like, yeah, they're somewhat interesting to me. They're not like jump up and down exciting, but I wanted to talk about them. But sometimes I'll reach a 3-day window where I'm looking at the news and I'm like, we talked about that. So if I have time, I'll do a live stream. But if there's time I could be spending with my friends or family, then I'm sorry. I'll prioritize that. I wish I could hang out with all of you in person. That would be so fun. All of my, well, it wasn't too long ago. I think it was just last month I met Michael Burkhart in person and another viewer of the channel, Shay, and it was so much fun. Like just talking about software and hardware that we're interested in, and the in-person stuff is always amazing, and I always will choose that if I can. And at the end of the day, I wish I could not think about what's monetizable, and I could not think about bills and income and expenses and that kind of thing. But unfortunately, that's just kind of the way the world works. And I have to be somewhat conscious with income and expenses and stuff like that. But in a perfect world where everything's just kind of working the way I'd like, I mainly look at it as the live stream time is an efficient way that I can interact with a bunch of my friends all at once, and I can get your guys' ideas and impressions. There's Randy. Tailosive Tech and Randy Nexus should collaborate. We should start a podcast. Ooh. Oh, Randy says he's about to drop a video about this live stream topic. Interesting. We need to... I need to catch that one. Some Apple Intelligence features were supposed to ship in Beta 3, but they pulled them last minute. Doesn't surprise me. Large language models are fickle beasts. Yeah, that meetup was great. Neither of us had plans that day, so it was extremely perfect. Yeah, no, it was fantastic. It worked out wonderfully. But yeah, I always just feel like if I could choose between I'm interacting with my friends here, and then when we get sick of each other, when we're done talking about a topic, because we all have other lives and other friends and family we have to talk to, then we go our separate ways, and then I'll hang out with my other friends and family. And a perfect world would just be going throughout the day and interacting with the people you respect or love or care about, you know. That would be heaven to me. We all just get together and talk about things we like and don't like, and yeah, it's just the human experience. But because I can't make a living off of just meeting up with my friends, this is pretty much the closest thing I have to that, is being a content creator. You find other people interested in the same things, and you try your best to engage with them and interact with them, and you share your thoughts, and you guys share yours back. It's a good system. I'm very grateful for it, and I never really want to stop doing it. My mind might change in the future. I don't know. At least in this moment, I don't feel like I'll ever get tired of it. Maybe one day I'll get tired of it, especially when people start making fun of you or calling you names, which I had a lot of yesterday, sadly, or the day before. That's when it gets hard, when everybody's just being mean to you. But that's just when you need to just take a break. Just step away from social media and focus on the people who actually care about you. Let's see. I wouldn't watch a video with that title. Which title? Did I see Nikias Molina's video on why the iPad doesn't need macOS? I haven't, but I would love to watch it. I already disagree, by the way. I haven't seen it, but I've yet to hear a compelling argument, and if there was a really compelling argument in the video, I probably would have heard it from someone else by now, because I've been arguing with so many people about this exact same thing for years. And Randy says, I care. That would have been a better name than Apple Care. The Tesla community was insane in your replies on Twitter. Yes, it was. I agree. They were... Here I am just trying to share the experience of like, hey, this isn't very good. This kind of sucks. And everybody's just hates you for it. It's like... So when FSD does something great, we all praise it. And if it does something bad, we blame the operator. I don't really like the system we got going here. We've kind of built the narrative around it that it is flawless and it can do no wrong. And I don't think that's productive. And I want FSD to be good, and I want Tesla to improve it. But I think you cannot improve software, especially software that you want to do all these amazing things, without being critical. You have to highlight its weak points in the edge cases. Honestly, talking about how great it is not that valuable. That's something I've actually had a little bit of experiences. This is going to sound selfish and egotistic. I'm just warning you now. I'm very humble, okay? I'm the most humble man out there. Sorry, I'll leave the Trump impressions to Randy. But the people I work with at Tello have been very respectful and very complimentary of my work. I keep submitting videos to them and showing them what I'm working on, and they pretty much all say, yeah, that's great. Keep doing what you're doing. You're doing a great job. And I keep going, I need more feedback than that, you know? I get some feedback from the comments on social media, but most of it is about the product, not about me and how the content is produced. But I actually prefer having some constructive criticism. It's not constructive criticism to just call people names, which is what was happening in the Tesla community over the weekend, where they're just mad at you and call you stupid and call you an idiot. And that's different. But when people are genuinely saying, I don't like the way, or I don't like the way you handled this, or this part of the video is repetitive, or you should try to do more of this, I like getting some feedback so that I can understand how to improve the product. And I'm realizing, like, when you're working a new job, if people just say, okay, you're fine, you're doing great, you can't grow much from that. You don't know what to do next. So I'm kind of like, okay, come on, I'm ready for some more advice. And so they did give me some advice, but yeah, it wasn't as much as I was hoping. So in the same way, you know, when Tesla's experimenting with state-of-the-art software like this that's attempting things that have never been attempted before, I think you actually should highlight the shortcomings much more than the successes. Because from what I've learned testing the software, the successes may not be as consistent as you think. You may think it's figured out a certain area, but then go through that exact same area at a different time of day, and then it performs much worse. So it's like, yeah, you thought you thought it had it figured out, and then it turned out it didn't. Quinn's quote didn't feel as forgiving as it could have been, but it was something. I do think it was my fault as far as the tweet was concerned with the wording. I was very ticked off and I was very emotional when I wrote it because I was very frustrated at the entire situation. And I think a lot of people interpreted the tweet, which I don't think I was wrong in how I phrased it, but I do think people interpreted it as, oh, Drew doesn't think he's responsible. He doesn't think he's liable. He's wrong about that. When in reality, yeah, I knew it was my fault. I knew I was in the wrong. My point was, the fault was trusting the system in a place where it shouldn't have been trusted. The fault was not a lack of paying attention, which is why I was so frustrated, was because most of the community's response was, pay attention next time. And it's like, I'm always paying attention. I've never received a single strike. Everybody was in the car. They can testify. Like, yeah, I was hands on wheel, eyes on road, and sometimes that's not enough. But yeah, I appreciated Quinn being more sympathetic. Yeah, Quinn's a great guy. I actually did just watch his Cybertruck review, and I thought he did a fantastic job reviewing it. I pretty much agree with everything he said in that video. Tailosive Trump, oh god. I would love to go, I know it's an election year and stuff, but I would love to go one day in my life where I don't hear his name. It would be so satisfying if it just never came up. Same with Biden. When people call me names, I just laugh because we all know that I'm not, insert insult here, and it results in the commenter looking like a complete idiot. That's a good way to look at it. Remember that if people are resulting to name calling, it's probably because they've run out of any other genuine criticism. Pay attention more. Yeah, the whole pay attention thing is funny to me because it's like there's so many things you can be doing while driving and still be paying attention and still not see that something's going on. You know, in my particular case, the pothole was off to the side of the road. You're not staring off at the side of the road every time you drive. You're looking at the horizon, you're looking in your mirrors, you're looking at your speedometer, you're looking at all these different things at once. So you can absolutely be paying attention and still not realize that the car is drifting off. Now, I know that Tesla's not designed to detect potholes, but it is designed to stay on the road. And in that particular instance, it was not staying on the road. You literally said you wanted to see what FSD would do, meaning you had to pay attention to figure out what it would do. Right. Yeah, I think people all just have this vision in their head that I turn on FSD and then I pull out my phone and just start what? It did something. And it's like, no, I turned it on and I'm like doing this and I'm watching and I'm looking and then, oh, that's not, boom. That's essentially what happened. Almost in exactly that pace. It's like, okay, it's working. It's driving. That was really cool. We went through the construction zone. It was following the cones. That was great. Oh, it probably shouldn't be drifting. It was about that fast. That's how it all unfolded. It was like by the time I had recognized there was a problem, it was already too late. There was no way to correct the problem at that speed, at that time, with that visibility. But it would have been completely avoided had the car focused more on maintaining distance with the center line instead of trying to be centered between the two lines. which is a consistent problem that not just I have experienced. Lots of other people reported very similar issues, that the car software is designed to stay equal distant from the left and right lane on the road, whereas that's not how you're supposed to drive, at least in my experience. Roads are really crappy. Would have happened to human drivers too. I watched 100 cars drive by the exact same stretch of road, and not a single one hit the pothole. That's all I'm saying. Had FSD been disengaged, there wouldn't have been a flat tire and a damaged rim. Anyway, we gotta get Drew to go back to an SE2. I don't. Ever since I got Type C on this thing, it's gonna be really hard to get me to downgrade. I'm sorry. I like downgrading. It's fun to go back a little bit and see what phones used to be like. But now that I'm using my phone for work, it's tough. It's gonna be a tough justification. My car will be paid off in about 5 years. Then I will look at a Model Y or Rivian R2 or R3. Ooh, good choices. I just started working on the refresh Model Y. I'm excited for that one. That's going to be good. I'm curious if FSD would stop the car if the road were to suddenly collapse in front of it. Probably not, based on my experience, but Drew recently replaced 3/4 tires. Might as well do the last one. We did, actually. The 2 rear tires were brand new, so we just replaced the 2 front tires, but the frickin' service center put winter tires on them without telling me. And we were in a hurry because my wife had to get back to work today, so I was driving until 3 a.m. last night. It was crazy. It's not safe, but we had appointments and we had people waiting on us and family counting on us, so there was no option. We basically got it to the service. So the car hit the pothole, which was my fault, but the car was driving. I understand. It was Saturday night, so there were no service technicians available Saturday evening, and there were no service technicians available all day Sunday, and we were planning to drive back Monday. So we dropped it off at the service center. I called them all day Sunday. Their salespeople were there, ironically. So they will sell you a car on Sunday, but they won't service your car on Sunday. I personally think that's really backwards and messed up, but whatever. So we were supposed to leave super early Monday morning because it's like a 14, 15-hour drive. And we couldn't leave, obviously, because the car was still damaged and still at the service center. And I'm calling them right as they open, right at 8 a.m. And I'm like, hey, this is an emergency. We have family members expecting us, and we have work that we have to get to, my wife's job and stuff. So we really need this to get fixed as soon as possible. We're basically going to lose money every hour that we don't get this fixed. And they were like, okay, I understand. And they didn't want to move me up in the queue until I talked to a different technician. And then he was like, oh, you're in a hurry? And I'm like, yeah, that's what I told the other guy. And he was like, oh, well, we could probably fix that. So you just have to be there. If you're not at the service center, they won't be urgent with you. They'll just take as much time as they need. They'll just be like, yeah, we'll get to you. But unless you stand there and you're like staring like, hey, I gotta go. This is time sensitive. I'm already running late. Then they'll actually work on the car. And yeah, he said, yeah, we have your tires in stock. We can replace. And I said, just replace the left one too, because that's the only tire left now from the original set. So we don't need 2 newish tires, 1 brand new tire and 1 really old tire. Let's just get 2 new tires for the front since we just had 2 new tires for the back. So they put them on, and it was already running late. It took way longer than they said it was going to take, and we had to start the 15-hour road trip at like 11 a.m. So we were driving super late into the night. But as soon as I got the car, I basically rushed to get back to my parents' place so that we could pack up and get my dad. My dad joined me on this trip. So I didn't really even have time. I just ran out to the car and I'm like, okay, the tires are on. It's good to go. I get inside the car. There's no low pressure warnings or anything like that. The car's driving. It feels smooth. It feels stable. I asked them several times, is it safe? Is the tire, are the wheels going to be okay? We're about to take a huge road trip. And he said, yeah, that's fine. It'll be safe. So everything felt fine. Finally get to my parents' place, and my wife looks at the tires as we're packing up the car, and she goes, these are winter tires. And I was like, you're kidding. And I look at it, and yep, sure enough, they got the winter tread. It's not like studded tires, but, the tread is deeper in their Pirellis. So now I got winter Pirellis in the front and Michelin all seasons in the back. And we had to go. There was no time to go back to the service center and say, why did you put winter tires on? We just had to go. So, again, people were expecting us. People were counting on us. We had appointments that we were going to lose our deposits on if we didn't come home today. So we had to go. But at least they're nice tires. Pirelli makes good stuff. Not designed for California heat. They will wear insanely quick. I know. I'm with you. I'm not saying it's a good idea. I'm just saying this is what Tesla did, and I had very little time to react. Yes, I still rock my 15 Pro without a case. Hasn't cracked yet. We'll see. 15 Pro is a pretty great size, but I would like it a little smaller. I like the mini iPhones. I wish they could bring those back. I do like the size of the 15 Pro. It's a shame they're getting bigger, though. I'm not really excited for iPhones getting bigger because I feel like with my line of work, I don't know when it's gonna happen, but at some point I'm probably gonna upgrade again, and I know that I'll probably want the Pro, and if I want the Pro, then I'm gonna have to get an even bigger phone. Winter tires handle potholes better. Oh, good. Let me hit some more potholes. When the Magic Keyboard with trackpad came out, that's when I think this discourse really started. About iPadOS? Yeah, I agree. That was when it was like, okay, you're basically giving the iPad the exact same input connectivity options as a Mac. I remember before that, people were saying, why don't they add a trackpad to the iPad? And I was like, because you're confused. Like, if you want a trackpad, that's what a Mac is for. An iPad is a touch-dominant OS. I always said that's how you define a tablet. A tablet is a larger screen device that can only be interacted with a touchscreen. It's okay to have a keyboard as an accessory, but the touchscreen is mandatory. But then once they added the keyboard and trackpad, it was like, okay, actually now the touchscreen is optional. Yes, it's still very optimized for touch, but technically you could use your iPad for hours and hours and hours without ever touching the screen. So we're blurring the lines now between laptop and tablet, and if you're actively now selling it, advertising it all the time in laptop mode, then I'm going to ask for laptop features. Yeah. Don't downgrade, just use it until it doesn't fit your needs anymore. Yeah, we talked a bit about it on the tech podcast. The only reason I'm tempted to kind of upgrade is just because I want my wife. She's having a lot of issues with her iPhone 10. I know someone earlier was asking if Louise could come back on the channel, and I promise you guys, I've been asking for months. Please, honey, let's bring you on the tech channel and you can talk about your iPhone 10 experience. And she just not want to do it. She's just said, I'll just tell you how I feel and you can tell them. And I'm like, honey, but they like seeing you. And she's like, yeah, but I don't like being on camera knowing that there's all these techie guys because I feel like I'm going to say something wrong and everyone's going to laugh at me. And I'm like, no, honey, you won't say anything wrong. And I'll edit it. I'll make sure you're not going to embarrass yourself. People love it when you're on the channel. And she just does not want to do it. I promise you. I've tried over and over again. But she was surprisingly willing to be on camera for the latest Tailosive Life video where she cut her hair. I cut her hair, actually. I cut most of my wife's hair off. So if you want to see more Louise, she's on Tailosive Life somewhat recently. But that was a lot of build-up. That was like months and months of her prepping and saying, okay, we're going to do the video. We're going to do the video, and I want to say it this way, and I want it to be shown like this. So she's not like super comfortable on camera like I am. But occasionally, if it's something she feels a bit more comfortable with, or it's a field that she feels like I'm more at home at, then honestly, I'm surprised she's still willing to appear on some channels. Drew's wife hates us, confirmed. Yeah, pretty much. My wife hates all of you. No, I'm kidding. She loves you guys, but she just feels very, what do you call it? Disconnected from our lingo, our community. Did Louise feel differently about being on camera when you guys checked out Aptera? A little bit. I think she doesn't mind it as much when she's just like in a quick cutaway shot. In the Aptera video, she was just in it for a second or two. She has more issues when it's like the whole video is centered around her. If we sat down and I just said, okay, today we're going to talk about my wife's experience with the iPhone 10, that would be like, okay, too much attention on me. Louise doesn't mind weighing in from behind, being like, I'm going to say this or I'm going to say that, but she definitely prefers being behind the camera. She's quite the camera woman, though. She loves taking pictures, and usually if she's recording videos, she'll say, no, we have to frame it this way and make sure it's like this and make sure it's like that. So she has an eye. She has an eye for the camera, but she definitely doesn't like being on. Bring her back. She did great filling in for you, that one rumor recap video. Yeah, the only reason she agreed to do that was because I was super sick, and I agreed to script the entire thing. So that whole video she did when she substituted in for me was completely written by me. Even the jokes, even the bits that we worked in there. I had to write the whole thing out on an iPad, and then she basically read it like a teleprompter. Louise should have been at Plug and Play. I know she wasn't, but would have been cool. Yeah, I wanted her to. Yeah, I would have happily brought her along, but she had work that day. But don't ever assume that I'm trying to keep her off camera. I very much have told her time and time again, she's always welcome. I would love for her to be on camera for every video, because I love hanging out with her. She's funny, and she's great, and I'm glad I married her. But she just, I'm trying to be respectful. But yeah, she did a great job, I agree. She doesn't like being the center of attention, basically. Correct, yeah. Let's see. Didn't know you were a barber. Oh, I'm definitely not a barber, but I did cut most of her hair off. Oh, it's because of the price. Well, as you know, there are ways. It's fun watching you guys go to Tesla showrooms. I like the Model 3 refresh and Cybertruck videos. You guys should check out the Cybercab thing once it shows up. I'm very excited for the Cybercab. Not because I'm excited for robotaxis, but mainly because I want Tesla to make a super cheap, super small. I like small cars. That's why I'm a big fan of Tello. That's why I bought the Model 3 over the Model Y, was because I like smaller form factors. I've driven big cars, just to be clear. I've driven the Cybertruck. I've driven a Rivian. Rivian's not big. But for my old job before YouTube, when I worked on a Mandarin Ranch, I had to drive an F-350 pretty regularly, pretty often. I've driven F-150s too pretty recently. I haven't driven an F-350 in a while, but when I drove around that F-350, I hated it. I hated the lack of visibility. I hated feeling like a tank. I hated feeling like I'm not sure how much space there is. Should I keep backing up? I'm just a big fan of smaller vehicles that are efficient and practical and utility focused. And I think from what I'm gathering from both the book and the rumors surrounding the Tesla community, they're designing a vehicle that could become the robotaxi, but if robotaxi takes too long, they could easily add a steering wheel and pedals. But it'll be steer-by-wire, of course, because if it's a robotaxi, it has to be able to steer by itself, because there's not going to be a person controlling it. And honestly, it was probably my favorite feature of the Cybertruck when I drove it. I think it looks beautiful, but that's not really a feature. I think they're gorgeous. I saw lots of them on my last road trip. There were a ton of them at the service center, not for delivery. I want to try to normalize that there are Americans that like smaller vehicles. I know it's the typical cliche, American like big car, but I want to prove that there is a growing community of like people who like smaller, efficient vehicles, even in the U.S. We're a big melting pot, right? We got lots of different ideas. Plug and Play. I wrote it with a strike. Does that timestamps feature not support that? I don't know. I'm not sure why it didn't show up. You'll get more views if she's the main character of tech. Oh, I 100% agree. Of any channel, really. I mean, Louise is just like amazing. So, of course, we'd get more views. She just doesn't like being the center of attention. We basically need my nerdy thoughts and ideas to come out of her mouth. That's the key. That sounds horrible. I'm not going to repeat that. Yep, you can Theorize it all you want. It's not going to happen, I'm telling you. I straight up one point was like, honey, do you think we could do the interview video about the iPhone 10? And she said something along the lines of, ask me next month. It was like, she said, I have a lot I'm focused on right now, and I have to prep myself. I have to psych myself up for those kinds of videos, and I don't feel ready for it yet. Do I see the tech channel growing anymore? It's still growing. It's not popping off like crazy, but we have more subscribers than we did a day ago. Let me see. I think I have a list because Social Blade made it harder to keep track of milestones. Where did it go? Is it down here? Tailosive Tech milestones. Here you go. If I scroll to the bottom of this, you can see every, I don't know if you should count subscriber count, but every date that we gained another 1,000 subscribers. So we hit 258,000 in May, 257,000 in April, 256 in February. So definitely not like exploding, which I don't think really many tech channels are anymore because of the news drying up. But is the Mr. Beast version of Social Blade any better? I don't know. I haven't looked into that one. Heading to work, says Frildo. For real though. Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate it. I think the biggest thing I've driven was a Chevy Colorado, and not for long periods. My first car, which I drove for 5 years, was less than 100-inch wheelbase. Wow. Less than 100. That's cool. I was recently in Model 3 Taxi twice. Backseat legroom was not comfortable. I didn't like it. The Chevy Bolt was comfortable. Well, that makes more sense. The Bolt is taller. The 3's lower. But, yeah, my wife and my sister sat in the back of the Model 3 for like 15 hours yesterday. They seemed fine. They slept for a lot of it. I feel like you've hovered around 250K for years now. Let's see. I hit 250K in February of last year. I was at 200,000 in 2020. So I gained 50,000 subscribers in about 3 years. Again, not great growth, but we're not shrinking. Unless you go by maybe views or watch time, then we're probably shrinking. Anyway, remember when you told people to unsubscribe last year and people were worried for your mental health when you were trolling? Yeah, the sub count really doesn't translate to anything, by the way, for the algorithm, or, it's purely just for boosting people's egos and credibility. A lot of people attach their self-worth to their sub count, which I think is dumb. So I intentionally didn't want people who didn't want to be subscribed to be subscribed. So I just think a lot of people had probably hit subscribe who didn't mean to or didn't want to. So I said, let me try to actively convince people to unsubscribe. And it didn't work all that much. I lost probably like 100 subscribers out of, 250,000. Jonah Hammond says, my mother owns a Chevy Suburban and I hate driving it. She was an excuse to own a massive car, though. She's driving around tons of people and does long road trips often. I get it. I just don't think you need a big vehicle in order to do those things, at least technologically speaking. But yeah, I love driving smaller vehicles, and I like steer-by-wire. So the idea of Tesla making a smaller, cheaper car with steer-by-wire gets me very, very excited. So I cannot wait to see it. Less than a month, actually. They're going to unveil it on August 8th. So I know that when they unveil it, they're probably going to be bragging about how great of a robotaxi it'll be. And I'll be like, yeah, whatever. But add a steering wheel and pedals to this thing. Come on. Yeah, I mean, if it does become a robotaxi, though, and it does effectively work, it'll probably just be in a few cities at first, and I'd be happy to ride one around. That'd make a fun video. Now I don't even have to buy the car. You probably can't buy the robotaxi because it's far more profitable for them to just treat it as a taxi cab. It'll make 30 grand a year, and then 10 years you made 300 grand or whatever. So I would just ride around in it, make a video about that, just check it out in person. She uses every inch of the storage on road trips, plus loading luggage on the roof. I understand. I'm just saying that smaller vehicles, you can make vehicles a lot smaller without compromising on the storage space. Lucid Gravity is a good example. Much smaller than a Suburban, but probably close to the same amount of storage space. There's a lot of things that start making sense when you get rid of the combustion engine, but rim damage, that's the sucky part. I still don't know how the Cybertruck legally sold, because last I checked, steer-by-wire technically isn't even legal yet. Where did you see that, is my question. Show me the law. Anyway, it's getting hot, and people are waiting on me, so I think I'll wrap it up here. But I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Thank you for your super chats, all the new members. It was a lot of fun talking with you all. And yes, I'm very excited for Shrek 5. I'm not going to talk about it on Tailosive Media, because, yeah, Hasiel took down the whole channel single-handedly. But anywho, thank you all for watching, and I can't wait for Shrek 5. Bye-bye.